My name was Dr. Amir Kamal. I was a neurosurgeon, revered in the halls of a Boston hospital. A proud Muslim, I wore my faith like armor, believing it shielded me from the chaos of life. Yet beneath that surface, I was a man grappling with an unfathomable emptiness, a void masked by accolades and respect. I lived for my patients, but I was losing myself. The pressure weighed heavily, intertwining with daily prayers that echoed back at me like whispers of doubt. With every prayer, a darkness grew, consuming my spirit. I questioned the very doctrines that shaped my existence. In the monotony of surgery and routine, I found myself haunted by dreams that flickered with enlightenment, yet were suffocated by shadow. Then came the day that changed everything. I collapsed before a high-stakes procedure, slipping into a realm where time ceased to exist. In that liminal space, I stood before Jesus, not as a figure cloaked in reverence, but as a blazing light piercing through my confusion. He called to me by name, revealing a truth I had never dared to fathom. A spiritual battle that raged beyond the walls of religion, gripping our world in unseen chains. When I returned, I was reborn yet deeply scarred. The light had entered, but it was met with fierce rejection. My family, my colleagues, they declared me a heretic, a traitor to my faith. The burden of guilt threatened to drag me back into the shadows. Yet there was an undeniable calling, a whisper of hope urging me to pursue a greater purpose. In secret, I sought out the very faith I once shunned, uncovering communities that shared tales of radical transformation and divine encounters. The conflict within me only deepened as I straddled two worlds, one that wanted to shackle me, and another that promised liberation. My first prayers to Jesus were desperate, laden with a yearning for spiritual rebirth and connection beyond the confines of the familiar. Now, as I stand on the precipice of a new mission, I implore you to listen closely. If you feel the tug of truth pulling at your spirit, you are not alone. Before we dive deeper into this journey, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And what time is it in your part of the world? Every story matters. And if you love Jesus and seek the light of truth, subscribe to our channel, Truth from Beyond. Together, we will explore revelations that can change everything, one testimony at a time. In the high-tech hospital in Boston where I work as a neurosurgeon, the air buzzes with the urgency of life and death. This environment, ripe with Western medical advancements, often feels entwined with the strong Islamic traditions I hold dear. As I prepare for another day in the operating room, my heart is heavy with the weight of responsibility. Each decision I make could alter the course of a patient's life, yet beneath the surface of my professional demeanor lies an unsettling tension. I feel torn between my faith and the pressure to conform to the rigorous demands of the medical field. As I stood in the surgical prep area, I took a moment to quiet my thoughts and connect with God through prayer. Yet, as I murmured the familiar verses, an emptiness settled within me. Questions loomed large, questions I had been pushing aside for too long. Was I truly living my faith? Did I fully understand the teachings of Islam? Or had I allowed the demands of my profession to overshadow my spiritual journey? The uncertainty gnawed at my conscience as I prepared for the surgery ahead. I felt the oppressive pull of a hidden agenda, the notion that perhaps the elite in our society were manipulating the very beliefs I held dear. And I feared being trapped in a facade of adherence to tradition. On the table in front of me lay a patient, while my mind began to wander into a realm beyond my control. Out of nowhere, I experienced what I can only describe as a near-death experience. As I closed my eyes for a moment, a brief respite from the weight of the world, I suddenly found myself in a vast, dark void. Contemplation turned into surreal immersion. The sensation of stillness wrapped around me, and then the overwhelming brightness of light emerged, cutting through the darkness. It was here that I encountered Jesus, and his presence was unlike anything I had ever felt before. "Amir," he called out with an authority that resonated deeply within my soul, rendering every doubt I had encountered irrelevant. In that moment, a flood of revelations washed over me. Jesus began to unveil the reality of the spiritual war waged around us, exposing the deceptions that dictated lives within communities. I saw vivid images of societal structures at play. Political leaders, religious institutions, and media conglomerates, all working in unison to maintain control over those who remain unaware of their manipulation. I caught glimpses of how these hidden agendas perpetuate fear, division, and chaos among the masses. Tools used to keep us from recognizing our shared humanity and the power of love that transcends borders. The truths revealed to me cut through the layers of my conditioned mind, causing everything I thought I knew to come crashing down. As the vision began to fade, I struggled against the pull of that growing light back toward my consciousness. For a brief moment, I understood the depth of the work I needed to undertake. I came to realize that my experience was not merely for my own enlightenment. It was a call to action. I felt an insatiable desire to share this truth with others, to warn them about the manipulations at play in our lives. The urgency thrummed within me as I recognized that silence would mean complicity in the ongoing deception, a betrayal of the very teachings I'd been raised to uphold. I could no longer ignore the prompting of my heart. I needed to confront my fears and the looming isolation that could accompany my newfound mission. When I awoke fully to the reality of the sterile operating room, the familiar sights and sounds felt surreal. Equipped with a sense of divine purpose, I realized the profound impact of the revelations I'd encountered. The clarity and urgency propelled me forward, reminding me that this spiritual journey was no longer just an internal affair, but a mission affecting those around me. As I prepped for the surgery ahead, I grappled with the knowledge that I could leverage my position to expose the truth. I stood at a crossroads, torn yet determined. The patient before me demanded my medical expertise, while my heart ached to speak of the awakening I had experienced at the hands of Jesus. Could I find a way to balance these responsibilities and share the truth that had been entrusted to me? The stakes were high, and I knew my journey was just beginning. As a neurosurgeon in Boston, I carried a certain respectability within the medical community, as well as in my personal circles. At 38 years old, I had achieved what many would consider the pinnacle of success: advanced skills in my field and a devoted adherence to my faith as a Muslim. Yet beneath the surface of my achievements, I wrestled with profound emotional emptiness. As I operated on patients, saving lives and transforming futures, I felt a growing disconnection within myself, a void that seemed to widen each day. My prayers became an obligatory routine, a checklist of sorts, rather than the meaningful communion they were supposed to represent. At night, when the world around me settled into silence, the weight of my internal conflict pressed heavily upon my heart. I admired my surgical talents and the trust placed in me by patients and families, but each success felt dulled by an unseen anxiety. I began to question whether the life I was leading aligned with the deeper truths I sensed were waiting to be discovered. The tension felt unbearable at times, leading me to wonder if the very faith that had guided my life was, in some ways, contributing to my spiritual disconnection. Expressions of faith, instead of providing comfort, often felt like chains binding me to a life devoid of deeper meaning. Then one fateful day, after a long shift, I was involved in a near-fatal accident. I remember the moment of impact. Everything went dark as my consciousness slipped away. In those moments, I drifted into a realm of profound stillness, a space where the laws of the natural world carried no weight. It was here that I encountered a radiant light, and as I approached, I knew instinctively that it was Jesus. As his light enveloped me, I felt a warmth and understanding I had never known. "Amir," he called gently, and those few syllables struck to the core of my very being. Through that divine encounter, Jesus began to unveil the truths I had long suppressed. He exposed the hidden agendas woven into the fabric of our society, how the elite manipulate religious and political narratives to sow division and control the masses. As I stood in that sacred light, the reality of a spiritual war unfolded before me. I witnessed the conflicts around the world, not just physical wars fought in far-off lands, but a deeper struggle for the hearts and minds of humanity. I saw how deception was used as a weapon to keep us from the truth, blinding us to the love that unites us all. When I awoke from that experience, I knew my life could never return to its previous state. The operating room, once my sanctuary, now seemed filled with shadows. I understood that my journey was about more than my career or my faith. It was a calling to share the revelations I had been given. It dawned on me that remaining silent would mean allowing the deception to continue unabated, letting fear dictate my actions. Would I have the courage to break free from the expectations placed upon me? Could I embrace the truth I had encountered without losing everything I held dear? The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but deep down, I felt an urgency to communicate the changes within me and to guide others towards their own awakening. As I settled into my daily prayers, I began to feel an unsettling wave of discontent wash over me. With each recitation, I went through the motions, but a profound emptiness gnawed at my spirit. I is Amir, a neurosurgeon dedicated to healing, yet here I was, feeling fragmented and lost. My life, filled with the rigor of medical practice and adherence to my faith, seemed increasingly hollow. I had always prided myself on my discipline and devotion, but those very qualities were beginning to feel like a cage, restraining me from discovering a deeper connection to the divine. This unease began to manifest in my dreams, where the lines between clarity and darkness blurred. I would wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, drenched in sweat, from visions that haunted me. In these dreams, I encountered stark images that seemed to reveal the spiritual war raging not only within me but also in the world around me. In the shadows of my sleep, I witnessed conflicts and struggles that mirrored the challenges we faced. Wars prompted by hidden agendas, manipulation by the elite, and the ever-present deception that kept so many of us staring into the void. Seeing these truths reflected back at me in such vivid detail was jarring, and I found myself grappling with the implications of what I was experiencing. It was during one particularly powerful dream that everything changed. I stood in a vast, shadowy landscape, surrounded by the echoes of voices calling for help, confusion, and longing. Suddenly, a light broke through the darkness, illuminating the space around me. As I walked toward it, the figure of Jesus emerged, radiant and filled with love. "Amir," he called, and in that moment a flood of warmth enveloped me. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and acceptance that shattered the darkness I had been wrestling with. Jesus began to impart revelations that shattered my understanding of faith, identity, and purpose. He showed me the ties that bind us all, the shared fears and struggles that keep us divided in a world fraught with tension. Jesus revealed the hidden agenda of those in power who exploit these divisions to control the masses, weaving webs of deception so intricately that most live oblivious to the manipulation at play. I began to see how the systems I had trusted were often designed to keep people complacent, perpetuating cycles of suffering. This revelation filled me with urgency. I understood that I could no longer remain on the sidelines. My experience had granted me insight, but I realized it was not just for my own sake. It was a call to awaken, to expose the truths that illuminate the path out of darkness. When I awoke from that dream, the weight of its implications pressed upon me heavily. I found myself in a state of turmoil, torn between the life I had led and the truths I could no longer ignore. I felt compelled to share the revelations I had received, to speak out against the hidden agendas that preyed on the vulnerable. Yet the price of this awakening threatened to cost me dearly. The fear of rejection by my family and community, those who had shaped my identity, loomed large in my mind. Could I navigate this new reality without losing everything? I was set on a path that promised liberation but also threatened isolation, and I knew I had to summon every ounce of courage to step into the light and confront whatever lay ahead. During a critical surgical procedure, the weight of stress settled heavily on my shoulders. I am Amir, a neurosurgeon known for my precision and expertise, but that day, the pressure felt insurmountable. My hands trembled slightly as I prepared for what was meant to be a routine operation. The stakes were always high, and I knew that every decision I made could change a life forever. Thoughts of my family's expectations loomed in the background, adding to the chaos in my mind. As the anesthetic took hold, I felt a brief wave of relief, but it was quickly eclipsed by the anxiety that had begun to stretch its claws around my consciousness. Then everything went dark. I collapsed, slipping into a coma that felt both profound and surreal. It was as if I had been catapulted from reality into a liminal space, a void so deep that I couldn't pinpoint its edges. In this silence, I drifted alone, feeling a sense of despair and isolation I had never known before. Suddenly, I was surrounded by an ethereal light, and against this dazzling backdrop, the figure of Jesus stepped into my vision. He radiated a sense of love and truth that instantly washed over me, soothing the raw edges of my fear. "Amir," he called softly, and the depth of his voice resonated with my very soul. In that sacred moment, the revelations began. Jesus conveyed the truth about the spiritual war that transcended religious boundaries, an ongoing battle that involved not just individuals, but entire societies. I was shown how manipulation and deception permeated the structures of power, how political and religious leaders, often the elite, crafted a hidden agenda that kept people shackled to their fears and misconceptions. The images flashed before me, conflicts ignited by propaganda, divisions created to maintain control, and how many lived unaware of the dark forces working tirelessly to exploit our vulnerabilities. Each truth unveiled felt like a wound being healed, exposing the layers of fear that had clouded my judgment. I began to understand that many people were trapped in cycles of deception, clinging tightly to beliefs that no longer served their spiritual growth. The urgency in Jesus' voice stirred something within me, urging me to awaken, to not only embrace this new understanding, but to share it with others. I realized that my experience was not simply a personal transformation. It was a commission to advocate for the truth, to challenge the deception everywhere I saw it, especially within my own life. As I floated in that divine space, a sense of mission enveloped me. I could not ignore the call to confront the fear that had governed my life and the lives of those around me. I saw myself as an instrument of change, tasked with guiding others through their personal awakenings. I could feel the tension of this realization tugging at me. Would I have the courage to stand against societal expectations and share the truths I had found? Would my family and community understand? Or would they cast me aside as a heretic? The spiritual war that awaited me on the other side of this experience promised to test not only my resolve but also my commitment to the awakening I had just encountered. When I finally awoke from the coma, a transformative light flooded my consciousness. It felt as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a depth of understanding I had never known before. I am Amir, a neurosurgeon who had always dedicated his life to the pursuit of excellence in my field. Yet I was now faced with an overwhelming sense of both empowerment and vulnerability. Almost immediately, I realized that as enlightening as my experience with Jesus had been, it did not come without consequences. The backlash erupted like a storm, a tempest I had begun to anticipate but was hardly prepared to withstand. The first sparks of rejection came from my family. The moment I shared what had happened to me, the revelation of Jesus and the knowledge I had gained, I was met with cold stares and hushed whispers. They branded me a heretic, a twisted interpretation of faith that left me feeling severed from my roots. The pain of seeing disappointment in their eyes cut deeper than I could have imagined. I felt as if I was losing not just my family but the very fabric of my identity. I spent countless nights grappling with guilt and fear, the haunting thought that my awakening might cost me everything I had worked so hard to build. Turning to my colleagues for support was equally daunting. As a respected member of the medical community, I prided myself on my reputation, grounded in reason and adherence to the scientific method. Yet now, I felt as if I was straddling two worlds, the rigorous logic of medicine and the profound spiritual truths I had encountered. Admitting that I had heard the call of Jesus to people who had themselves dedicated their lives to science invoked discomfort. I feared being dismissed as delusional or worse. The pressure of maintaining my professional facade weighed heavily on me, amplifying my isolation as I sought answers to questions that now flooded my conscious mind. In the silence that followed my awakening, I reveled in the memories of the truths Jesus had revealed to me. I realized that the spiritual war one had glimpsed was far greater than any personal struggle. It encompassed societies, cultures, and ideologies entrenched in deception. Jesus revealed the hidden agendas that manipulated so many lives, creating conflicts and division that served only the interests of the elite. I began to understand the urgency of that mission, to unmask the deception woven into the structure of our lives, freeing not just myself, but inspiring others to seek the truth. Each day since my awakening became a battle, not for my own soul alone, but for the souls of those still enshrouded in darkness. Driven by the conviction of my revelations, I turned inward, determined to navigate my new reality, not just with fear, but with the hope I had unearthed from that experience. I sought communities where I could share my newfound beliefs and find solace in shared spiritual struggles. I began reading more about Jesus and his teachings, hoping to ground myself in the truth he brought forth. My conversations with fellow believers became a sanctuary, a safe haven where faith was entwined with personal stories of awakening. Together we explored how best to confront the spiritual war that raged in our midst, discussing the manipulation at play in political arenas, media, and societal norms, all aimed at keeping humanity divided and fearful. Amidst this newfound purpose, the specter of family rejection loomed large. Each time I prepared to speak publicly, I wrestled with doubt. Would I be cast out forever, Or could I somehow bridge the chasm that separated me from my loved ones? I clung to the hope that my commitment to uncovering the truth would eventually lead them to understanding. I envisioned a world where love could triumph over fear, where the light of awakening would bring healing not just to individual souls, but to entire communities struggling against the tide of manipulation. As I stepped into this new chapter, I understood that the path forward was fraught with challenges, but with each decision I made, my resolve grew stronger. The call to action had never been clearer. This was my spiritual war, my chance to fight for the truth I now knew was worth any cost. In the quiet hours of the night, while the city of Boston slept outside my window, I found myself grappling with the weight of my choices. As a neurosurgeon, my life revolved around precision and rationality. Yet I felt an undeniable pull toward exploring Christianity. I began to delve into the Bible, the text whispering truths that struck chords deep within my spirit. With each page I turned, I felt a flicker of awakening, a connection to Jesus that resonated with my soul. But that sense of peace was often overshadowed by the turmoil brewing in my heart. I knew that exploring these beliefs could mean abandoning the faith and culture that had shaped my identity, and that thought filled me with anxiety. As I navigated this internal conflict, I sought out groups of individuals who understood the struggles I faced. These meetings became clandestine gatherings, where we shared our stories and the ways we had encountered the divine. I found comfort in their experiences, each testimony echoing my own journey of awakening. Together, we would discuss the hidden agendas we suspected were at play in our lives, the manipulation by the elite, and the deceptions that held so many captive in cycles of confusion. There was a shared urgency within our group, as if we were all called to confront the spiritual war that surrounded us, one that kept us disconnected from the truth. Despite these moments of connection, my heart remained heavy with fear regarding my family's potential reaction. Growing up, my ties to tradition had been everything. The thought of renouncing those beliefs felt like tearing myself apart. I remembered my early prayers, once simple expressions of devotion, now transformed into desperate cries for a spiritual rebirth. I wanted so badly to share the beauty and love I felt in my relationship with Jesus, but the fear of rejection loomed like an ominous cloud. Would my family understand, or would they cast me aside for this journey that felt so right yet so fraught with peril? In the midst of this anxiety, I turned to my nightly prayers, pleading for guidance and clarity. God had always been my silent comfort, but now I craved a more profound connection to Jesus, one that would anchor me amidst the chaos of doubt. The recurring dreams I had played back in my mind like a film reel, filled with the light and love I had encountered during my near-death experience. In those dreams, Jesus stood before me, urging me to embrace the truth and to stand firm in the face of deception. It was as if he was reminding me that my calling was more than just a personal journey. It was a mission to help others find their own paths to awakening. As I embarked on this spiritual journey, I knew that I would face challenges. The truths I began to uncover about the manipulation of faith and the hidden agendas of those in power were unsettling. How could I reconcile my past with this new knowledge? How do I explain my transformation to my family when they might see it as a betrayal? With each passing day, the spiritual war intensified, pushing me to become a clearer voice for those who feel lost in darkness. I felt the urgency growing within me, a need to not only advocate for my own awakening, but also to shine a light for others struggling to break free from the chains of deception. And so I pushed forward, aligning my actions with the truth I had encountered, despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. Gradually, I began to perceive my experience with Jesus as a divine calling that must be shared. The weight of this realization pressed heavily on my chest, igniting a fire within me that demanded expression. I am Amir, a neurosurgeon with a life meticulously ordered around the expectations of my profession and my faith. Yet, standing in the aftermath of my encounter, I understood that I was thrust into the middle of a spiritual war, one not just within my own heart, but resonating throughout society. I felt compelled to break the silence of my past and confront the hidden truths that permeate our understanding of religion. In my professional life, I had always relied on concrete evidence, tangible results. But the awakening I experienced challenged everything I thought I understood. As I interacted with colleagues in the surgical field, I noticed how often our discussions circled back to a singular truth: the impact of our beliefs on our work and on our patients. Yet, this connection often overlooked the deeper, unseen battles that shaped our reality. The revelation of Jesus opened my eyes to the manipulation at play. How the elite use religion and spirituality to keep people disconnected from their true purpose. I believed the time had come for me to speak out against these deceptions, to unveil the hidden agendas that kept so many in chains. With each encounter, I felt the urgency mounting. The faces of those I had treated flooded my mind, the suffering, the fear, the hesitation. I recognized that many were living under the weight of spiritual and emotional burdens that mirrored my own struggles. I began to gather with small groups of individuals who had also encountered their own awakenings. These meetings became sacred spaces for sharing our truths, where we could discuss the barriers erected by long-standing traditions and the overshadowing fear of stepping outside those norms. I watched as these discussions invigorated our spirits, igniting passion and hope for change amid the backdrop of a world often filled with division and anger. I remember one particular meeting when a member shared their story of awakening. They spoke of a night filled with visions, a dark sky illuminated by the truth of Jesus, revealing the manipulations woven into their life. It was then that I realized each of our stories was interconnected, weaving a larger narrative of transformation and hope. I felt a deep sense of purpose as we collectively voiced our commitment to challenge the complacency that held many captive. The revelation that we could serve as catalysts for awakening fueled my own determination to step boldly into the light, regardless of what lay ahead. Yet the fear of personal loss still clung to me like a shadow. My family's expectations weighed heavily on my heart, and the thought of being labeled a traitor to my faith terrified me. I had always valued their approval and love, and now a choice loomed before me that could sever those ties forever. I continued to pray for guidance, seeking reassurance that this path was right. I understood that embracing truth sometimes entails sacrifice, but the knowledge I had received from Jesus would not allow me to remain silent. The awakening I'd experienced was not just for my benefit. It was a calling to illuminate the way for others still wandering in darkness. As I prepared to share my story, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. The idea of stepping into the public eye as a voice for truth was daunting, but I knew I couldn't ignore the call any longer. The spiritual war demanded that I act, that I serve as an agent of change, urging others to seek their truths. With every story I shared, with every connection I made, I felt the chains that had bound me begin to fracture. I was determined to confront the hidden agendas that sought to stifle our spirits and encourage others towards the freedom I had found through Jesus. The journey ahead promised challenges and uncertainties, But I knew that embracing my awakening meant also embracing the responsibility to combat the deception that surrounded us all. As I stood in the sterile environment of the operating room, the weight of my normal life as a neurosurgeon pressed heavily on my shoulders. Patients, lives rested in my hands, and the stakes had never felt higher. Yet, even surrounded by the mechanical hum of equipment and the focused energy of my team, I felt a profound emptiness growing within me. The calling of my profession had always been an honor, but deep down, I sensed something fundamental was missing. My life, driven by precision and dedication, felt like a performance, a script I was reciting rather than living. I was Amir, but who was I really outside my title and profession? That simmering discontent reached a breaking point during a particularly intense surgical procedure. The tension in the air was palpable, and as I navigated the delicate intricacies of a complex operation, I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion wash over me. I can't recall exactly when it happened, but as I began feeling lightheaded, I collapsed. Everything faded to black, and in that moment of unconsciousness, I was thrust into an unfamiliar realm. It felt like being pulled into a void, and as fear gripped me, I realized I was alone. Truly alone for the first time in my life. However, my solitude was short-lived. Out of the darkness, a brilliant light emerged, illuminating everything around me. The figure of Jesus came into focus, resplendent and full of love. Amir, he said my name with a voice that resonated deep within my soul. In that moment, every doubt and question I had struggled with slipped away. I felt embraced by a warmth that transcended understanding. This was more than a casual encounter. It was a divine revelation. Jesus began to unveil profound truths, sharing insights that shattered my previously held beliefs. He spoke of the spiritual war that raged not only within my heart but throughout the world, revealing the hidden agendas of the elite who manipulate power for their own gain. In that revelatory encounter, I saw how deception persisted in every corner of society. Jesus revealed how the structures of our world are designed to keep us divided, fostering conflict and misunderstanding among people who should otherwise unite in love. The visions were powerful, showing the ramifications of belief systems that have been weaponized against us. I witnessed the scars of division rippling through families, communities, and entire nations, all victims of a narrative crafted to maintain control. It became painfully clear to me that the truths I had taken for granted were often cloaked in deception. I was ignited by this knowledge, determined to understand more and share what I had learned. When I awoke from my experience, it was difficult to reconcile the overwhelming love and clarity I had felt with the reality I returned to. The sterile walls of the operating room once again surrounded me, as did the pressures of my life as a judge. The stillness of that encounter lingered in my heart, but now I faced the reality of what it meant to embrace this awakening. Moments after regaining consciousness, I encountered harsh whispers from my colleagues, skepticism masked with concern about the path I had begun to embark upon. The fear of being branded as a heretic by those I respected hung heavily over me. Yet the pull of my newfound convictions was too strong to ignore. Determined to forge ahead, I resolved to renounce my old patterns and step into the role of an advocate for truth. Though the potential consequences weighed on my heart, the call from Jesus to embrace my purpose resonated louder than the fears. I began to connect with secret groups of believers navigating a similar awakening, sharing insights and testimonies in a safe space. In these exchanges, I found both a sense of community and a steadfast commitment to challenge the hidden agendas that govern our lives. The spiritual war would not be won quietly. It demanded our voices, our courage, and our will to face the forces that sought to divide us. I felt the urgency to act grow stronger with every passing day, knowing that to remain silent was to betray not only my own awakening but the very truth Jesus imparted to me. Years after that life-changing experience, I now actively live my mission, deeply committed to sharing the profound impact of my journey with others. The transformation that occurred within me, the revelations that unfolded during my near-death experience, have become a beacon for those seeking truth in a world shrouded in deception. I am Amir, a neurosurgeon who once lived in a state of constant internal conflict, yet now I stand firm in my new identity as a follower of Jesus. Each day is an opportunity to witness the awakening of others, yet the desire for my family's acceptance remains a bittersweet reminder of the price I've paid for this journey. I often reflect on how my life once revolved around the rigid structures of my profession and the expectations of my culture. I was respected, admired even, but beneath that surface lay a profound dissatisfaction. The spiritual war one encountered compelled me to seek the truth, something I found in the teachings of Jesus. Sharing my testimony has not come without challenges. Each story I recount is a thread woven into a larger tapestry, revealing the hidden agendas of the elite that manipulate belief systems. Many still remain blissfully unaware of the way spiritual and political powers conspire to keep us divided, something I now feel a responsibility to expose. Despite the fear and disapproval from my family, I refuse to waver in my convictions. I speak with urgency, not only for my own healing, but for the deliverance of those still trapped in spiritual darkness. Whenever I meet someone struggling with their faith or their place in the world, I see remnants of my former self. The doubt, the confusion, the longing for authentic connection. I remind them of the love Jesus offers, the truth that transcends cultural divides, urging them to embrace their own awakenings. Each encounter reiterates that this mission is far greater than my individual path. It's a collective calling to rise against the forces of deception threatening our connection to the divine. As I continue to share my journey with those who listen, I often encounter resistance. Some faces reflect skepticism, while others shine with curiosity. Each response I receive serves as a reminder of the profound awakening needed in our society. The tension surrounding my faith journey only deepens my resolve. I am driven to dismantle the barriers that separate us, to illuminate the reality that we are all part of a shared spiritual war. Those who hear my story deserve the chance to confront their own hidden fears and grow into a deeper understanding of the love that Jesus offers. Though the longing for reconciliation with my family is a constant companion, I know that my path to truth cannot be diverted. The process of awakening has shaped me into a voice for those still caught in the shadows of doubt and fear. I carry the hope that one day my family will understand the profound love and peace that have transformed my life. Until then, I will stand firm in my commitment to the truth and advocate for a world where love prevails over fear. A world where the awakening continues to unfold, lighting the way for others to find their own paths to freedom. In the months since my awakening, I've come to realize that spiritual truth can challenge every convention I've ever known. I am Amir, a neurosurgeon entrenched in the world of medicine, yet I now find myself confronting the labels and expectations imposed upon me by my family, my faith, and my community. My experience with Jesus was not just a moment of divine revelation. It became a catalyst for transformation in my life. Yet with that transformation came the realization that I was stepping into a spiritual war, one that demanded I challenge not only my beliefs but also the very structures that had defined my identity. Every day, I continue my work in the operating room, where life and death hang in delicate balance. Each surgery presents an opportunity to make a difference, yet now I approach these moments with a newfound sense of purpose. I've seen incredible suffering, not just physically but spiritually as well. Many of my patients bear the weight of fear and doubt, often influenced by the hidden agendas of society, the very elite who profit off misunderstanding and manipulation. My conversations with patients have changed. I now strive to communicate hope, to share the light I found in my encounter with Jesus. There is a truth that transcends the ordinary, one filled with love and acceptance that can illuminate even the darkest corners of the heart. Reflecting on my journey, I often think of the moments when I struggled with familial rejection. The pain of being labeled a heretic stung deeply, yet it was this very pain that also propelled me forward. I began to actively seek out others who shared similar experiences, connecting through small groups focused on awakening. Here, I found solace among those navigating their own awakenings, and we collectively explored how our experiences intertwined with a larger spiritual narrative. The stories we shared highlighted the urgent need for raising awareness about the ongoing spiritual war. Together, we faced the challenge of how to communicate our truths to those still bound by deception. In every discussion, there was a palpable sense of urgency. We spoke of the manipulation inherent in political and religious systems, the deceptions crafted by those seeking to maintain power through fear. I learned how important it was to challenge the status quo and to advocate for love and unity. The hidden agendas people often overlook can tear apart societies, yet it is the hidden truths that can restore connection and understanding among us. I felt immense responsibility to shed light on these issues, knowing that many were unaware of the spiritual battles raging around them. As I stand firm in my convictions, I know that the path ahead will be fraught with challenges. The clash between my old life and the new truths I have embraced weighs heavily on my heart. I often find myself breaking down those walls of fear and doubt. I hold hope that one day my family will be able to see beyond the labels and understand the peace I found in Jesus. It's not merely about my personal awakening. It's about offering a lifeline to others still crying out in the darkness, encouraging them to seek their own paths towards liberation. The call to share this truth grows louder within me, and I am determined to carry it forward into a world that desperately needs awakening. Now that you've walked this journey with me, I have to ask, what if the world you know is just a facade? What if deeper currents are churning beneath the surface, seeking to keep us divided, blind, and afraid? The revelations I've encountered have left me with one undeniable truth. We are engaged in a spiritual war, and our lives are intricately woven into a tapestry far greater than our individual stories. Having felt the warmth of Jesus' presence and the clarity of his message, I can no longer stand idle while the shadows loom over our hearts. Every experience that we cannot articulate, every dream that stirs our spirit, is a whisper urging us to awaken. The truth may unsettle you, but it is also the key to liberation. I want to know from you, have you had moments that challenged your understanding of faith or identity? Your stories deserve to be heard, so share them in the comments. I read every word, and together we can create a community of truth seekers. If you felt a flicker of urgency resonating within you through my account, please subscribe to Truth from Beyond and hit the notification bell. By joining our community, you are stepping into a profound journey of revelations, insights, and testimonies that have the power to reshape lives, yours included. Because what's coming next, it's even more compelling. A deep dive into transformations that illuminate the darker corners of our spiritual landscape. In our next episode, get ready to hear a powerful testimony of another miraculous encounter that sheds light on the hidden forces shaping our reality. You won't want to miss it. I'm Amir, and I want to thank you for journeying with me today. Remember, truth won't just find you, it will transform you if you're ready to embrace it. Until next time, stay curious and courageous.